All right, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ken, and I'll be your moderator for today. And today's topic will be positive disruption, health and education in a digital age. Okay, about a little bit more about SYEA. This session is brought to you by Singapore Young Entrepreneurs Award, also known as SYEA Organizing Committee. SYEA is a youth empowerment initiative founded by a team of youth passionate in making an impact in the business world. Now, we aim to honor and empower local youth entrepreneurs who have implemented commercially viable business solutions and sustainable impact to the community with stellar results. Okay, so today on our show, we are honored to have 3 business leaders from different industries to share their insights on our topic. Okay, now let's introduce our guest speakers for today. Firstly, we have Mr. Ching Hock Huat, the founder of Gifted and Talented Education Group. Mr. Cheng, please give our viewers and listeners an introduction about yourself. Mr. Cheng, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us in this going to be a casual dialogue session. Again, never meant to be an expert sharing. It's just a sharing of the bullet marks that we have in our body as fellow entrepreneurs and business practitioners. So I used to be running an IT consulting firm. I founded in '98 in the midst of the financial crisis, Asian financial crisis. Maybe some of you were too young, but it's really quite a bad timing. And thank God we survived. And 8 years later, in 2006, we were acquired by a New York-listed company called Keen, which acquired us, and I became the Asia Pacific CEO for 4 years. And that was when I became a part of a 13,000-man company. It is really an exciting journey. And I remember my chairman, when he met me and acquired me, he said he trusted Lee Kuan Yew, right? So that's why he's coming to Singapore to acquire a Singapore company, because we are known for integrity, our hard work, and our trustworthiness. But of course, he also trusted Napoleon. He also acquired one company in France that didn't do that well. So, but the long and short is that because of the right things that our government has done and really put us on the world map, we really have enjoyed this bliss. And after that, I'm actually a father of 5 children. That's the reason why my wife and I decided to go into the education business, primarily to save the tuition fee. And of course, we say that if we do it well, the kids will be the biggest beneficiaries. So we focus on the high-ability kids, and we run a few preschools and a few enrichment centers. And now we even have online students. And the COVID forced us to make online offering a core offering, today. So now we are going to plan to regionalize the business and maybe start an international school over time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cheng. We're looking forward for you to share your insights and experience with us later. All right, next up, we have Mr. Kanesh B., the founder of Aerodynamic Laboratories. Mr. Kanesh, please do give us a few words and introduction about yourself.
Yep. Thanks. Good afternoon to everyone, including our viewers. So I'm the founder of Aerodynamic Laboratories, and we actually do enrichment workshops for students of all ages. In fact, we have actually expanded our workshops for much older generation right now as well. The other segment that I do is actually the research and development of new products and services. This includes prototypes and equipment and research prototypes. So these are the 2 main segments. And on top of that, I have an incubation startup, which is known as WAP. And we actually are developing a high-altitude solar UAV system. So this is actually going to harness the power of the sun and fly really far and long. So these are the 2 things. So I'm really fairly a very young entrepreneur. I started when I was 17. So Aerodynamic Laboratories was about 7 to 8 years of my journey, and WAP is about 2 years. Yep, that's a bit about me. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kanesh. Of course, last but not least, we have here with us today Mr. Bahagraph Sosil, the founder of Meteos Technologies. Mr. Bahagraph, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm probably the least experienced entrepreneur out of all 3 of us, but a quick introduction about me. So I co-founded Meteos Technologies about 3 years ago in 2017, and our goal was to democratize eye care. We have, let's say in India, we have 1.3 billion people, and we have 15,000 eye doctors, and the ratios are very similar across the world. Because of this, patients cannot get access to eye care. And, oops, sorry, my mask is falling off. Yeah, because of this, patients can't get access to eye care. So what we did was, at Medios, we built software that allows any doctor, whether it's a GP, whether it's actually even a nurse, to diagnose eye diseases. And with this, we're able to now scale eye care and reduce the dependency on the very few and rare eye specialist doctors that are there. So long story short, we started this company 3 years ago, me and my co-founder, and last year we were actually bought out by a medical device company that wanted our IP and actually the team as well. So yeah, that's a quick intro.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bahagraf. Well, I think we have the perfect mix of individuals here today to share with us their insights. Yeah, let me share a little bit of the context of the dialogue we're going into. Well, as the world economy grows increasingly dependent on digital technology, from agriculture to manufacturing to the service industry, human capital grows increasingly important for stimulating national economies. While health and education are two very important characteristics of human capital, technology has the potential to revolutionize patient health and the way students learn. For the marginalized people who have disabilities, technology could also mean faster communication with healthcare professionals, more education opportunities for remote students, and more efficient services. Now, having said that, we've pre-prepared 7 questions, and I'd like to ask our guest speakers today. Now, recently, what are the most significant changes you have seen in the health and education front?
So I can definitely answer that with respect to healthcare primarily. Now, one of the biggest things that I've seen as a trend in healthcare is that today people are moving towards preventive healthcare. We are finally in a world where everyone's online, healthcare is online, people are using electronic systems in their hospitals, that we have a whole amount of data, both text-based data. Hey, is it okay if I take out my mask? It keeps falling out. Or
Yeah, sure. I think you can take out the... Can you take out the mask?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, my mask kept falling out.
Yeah.
But to answer the question, today we see everything becoming digital, including healthcare. You have EMRs that's collecting a lot of data on, hundreds of thousands of patients. We see this with images, text, things like blood sugar levels. We see healthcare becoming more ubiquitous with wearable computing, such as the Apple Watch and Fitbits and so on. What this now means, along with things such as deep learning and machine learning, healthcare can now become preventive in nature. You can start predicting a stroke before it can occur. You can actually predict that someone's going to go blind before they actually go blind. And this will now represent a whole paradigm shift to preventive healthcare instead of treatment-based healthcare that we were used to. And you can already see this happening, right? With the new Apple Watch that came out last year, it can tell you that you're about to fall even before you fall. It can actually raise, alerts if something's wrong with your blood sugar levels. Now, I don't use an Apple Watch, but I know people who do. I would never know something's wrong with me. I wouldn't go to a doctor to get myself checked, but if I have the Apple Watch, it tells me that. So this is a perfect example of how healthcare is becoming preventive in nature. The timing-wise is also perfect because today we are busy professionals. We don't have time to go to hospitals or doctors. All of us prefer convenience over health. So I also see that the next set of companies and the next set of technologies that are going to, represent this paradigm shift are also those that are going to be very convenient to use as part of our daily lives.
Is it because of COVID-19 it actually accelerated the
Well,
the
no,
interest
not really. I mean, COVID-19, I think, has accelerated things on some of the things like, telemedicine, digital consultations. But when you look at it, say the Apple Watch and its functionality came out even last year or 2 years ago, right? Fitbits have been around. I think humanity preferring convenience over health has been the norm for generations. People know smoking causes lung cancer, yet they go and smoke that cigarette. Everyone knows you need to diet and exercise, but no one really diets or exercises because they want convenient lives, right? I think technology that recognizes this and works on this aspect will, I would say, win the next generation of healthcare, right? Because people don't care about their health, so it must be done in a way where it just fits very seamlessly within my life. Now, COVID has helped certain aspects. It made it convenient for me to, get on a Zoom call with my doctor instead of travel all the way down to the clinic. It's made managing appointments a lot easier. So there has been some level of acceleration due to COVID, but I think this would have happened nonetheless, COVID or not.
And with this, do you see, do you think what can be improved, in our healthcare scene?
That's a good question. I think, so with healthcare, in general, it's a very multi-stakeholder industry. We have insurance, we have regulatory bodies, we have doctors, we have patients, we have sometimes the user of the medical device, which is neither the doctor or the patient, it could be a nurse or a lab technician. We have basically aggregators, they call them actually ICOs, and we have delivery networks that do this. And we have, of course, medical device companies, you've got pharmaceutical companies. Now, because of this inherent nature of healthcare being, you know, having all these different stakeholders, there tend to be a lot of silos. And what I mean is, tomorrow if I want to introduce a new change in the way healthcare is conducted, we at some level need to get a sign-off from every different stakeholder in the industry, right? For example, we build medical devices, but for us, we needed to get sign-off from a doctor, we had to get sign-off from the nurse, the patient, regulatory bodies, and we had to get insurance to reimburse our test before it can actually go into the market. And we were doing something very new, such as AI for healthcare, right? Doctors are like, hey, can I trust an AI to do a diagnosis? Patients are like, hey, can I trust an AI to do a diagnosis instead of a doctor that's gone for 4 or 5 years? For the nurse who's actually doing this test for our product, they're like, oh, this is very complicated to use. I'm used to the old school medical devices. This is so new. Can I use it? Then you have regulatory industries like the FDA. In Singapore, we have HSA that says, okay, we need to verify this as well. Even after all of that, they will say, look, we cannot use this in our clinic because insurance is not reimbursing it yet because it's so new. I think we have to find processes that can get everyone together in sync when something new comes up, and make sure that we can improve upon the speed of bringing something new into the market. Now, we actually launched our product first in India instead of anywhere else because India doesn't have as many of these concerns, right? We don't have regulatory bodies. Insurance is not prevalent in India. People pay out of pocket, so there are fewer stakeholders. And this meant we could get our product out in the market much faster, and we're being used across the country. But in Singapore or the US, it's like a 3-year journey even to just get people using it. So that said, if there's a way we can make this process a lot more efficient, then that is definitely something that can be improved on. Right. I don't know how though, but. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Paragraph. I mean, since we're in the topic about COVID-19, maybe I'd like to ask our guest speakers. All right, post-COVID-19, what are the opportunities you see in the Singapore health and education market? Maybe Mr. Cheng, you'd like to take this question.
Well, I think as a business practitioner, it's always important to remain optimistic, right? So come what may, whatever disaster, financial crisis, or your Lehman Brothers crisis or whatsoever, there will be new opportunities. And it's only meant for the optimistic, the driven ones to be able to see it. So for our education sector, I think we are quite lucky, even healthcare generally, unless a very tourist-based customer, we are the least scared, right? Least affected. Mm-hmm. I think we don't need to worry so much about having to cut manpower and all those, So keep the team intact, and the opportunities are plentiful. One of the things that, to link up to your first question, is that when the onset of COVID, when the enrichment centers were all suspended, before that we were already doing online on Zoom and class in with our Chinese and Hong Kong customers. So it wasn't new to us. But I was told that there are big enrichment centers that were sold for a few $100 million had problem moving because they were very big. So when you're nimble, you can move fast. So one of the antidote, I was reading this McKinsey report about what you should do to seize the opportunity. So a few things. You have to rebuild your business for speed. So one of the things that we actually, in all honesty, this is the best 8 months my company has ever performed. Without being arrogant, I tell you why. SME, you always have problem attracting the best people. Why? The best will either be their own entrepreneurs, like these two gentlemen, or they work for big-time MNCs, the Google of the world, the LinkedIn, all the atas companies, right? So the reality is that what you have are what are the leftovers. You just have to make use of this group of people, how you motivate them. So loyalty is a function of many things, including economic situations. So a market like this, we've got very good retention. Our staff are very happy that we are making every effort to keep everyone, and we took this opportunity to train even the junior teachers. So the morale is good. And we also realized that we were running enrichment, you run multiple centers. we may not always, when we're going for brick and mortar meeting, we may not always have 100% attendance, not even 60%, because everybody's busy. But now it's on Zoom, working from home. I usually have 100% attendance from teachers and the operations people. And the organizational communication is fantastic right now, because everybody knows what's going on. So you take this opportunity to clean up, to do training, to improve your communications. Really, there will be a lot of opportunity. One of the biggest things that all of us must understand is the notion of sunk cost. What do I mean? If you have to evaluate your business, not so much for mine, but for example, F&B and all this, some of your business will never come back. So from the McKinsey report, they tell you it's like your muscle. After a long rest, you got to rework that muscle, and some part of the muscle may not be there. You got to look for new business for 2021, instead of trying to salvage business that can never make it anymore from 2020. So this is called the notion of sunk cost, very important, because you'll be very emotionally attached, and it can be painful because you already have people in that business that previously yielded you profits and revenues. So you got to go with a clear mind. So to look for opportunities after COVID, you got to rebuild your muscles to look for new revenue that will bring you into beyond 2021. That will be your post-COVID norm. And for those that the business will never come back, it's just too bad. Translated to my enrichment business, now our online offering has become a concrete option, even though I may still do brick and mortar. But for a small country like Singapore, there are challenges for parents to accept online all the way, because somehow they feel that maybe you don't get the chi from the teacher if you do online, But if they've participated with us during the circuit breaker, they realize that now even the parents can participate in the lesson. Previously, in the classroom, parents are not allowed. But this is an acid test, the rubber hits the road for the teachers. Because if you're lousy teachers, now the parents know.
They know because they're there.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just giving an example that, so the notion is to rebuild your muscle, rebuild the business for speed. One of the things that we were able to do better than previous years is because we responded very fast. The moment when March, I remembered it was closed, enrichment. Straight away we moved. When they opened, they pushed the school holiday for June. I don't know whether you remember. They take away the holiday, the term continues. We move our academic terms also. So we're able to synchronize with MOE overnight. So that helped us in our P&L. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Maybe I'd like to add on. So what would be the future for health and education market you see from now on?
Well,
what advice do you have? Yeah?
Okay, I was just sharing casually at my generation, Actually, today when I came with, these two, they are so young, they are probably the Gen Y or even the Gen Z, I'm obviously from the Gen X, born in the, in the 60s and the 70s, But this generation of Singaporeans, I'm talking about Singapore specific, I feel that there's a huge opportunity from the silver generation, because our generation are quite blessed. Like I said, our government, our leaders, political leaders, have put us on the world map. Okay, so many of us are educated, we can go digital, we've got savings, and we are doing okay. So there will be a lot of savings, a lot of effective demand from this bunch of senior citizens in 2030, when even for my generation going near to 65 years old, 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be 65 years old by 2030. It's a fact that everybody knows. There's ample opportunity, like I kept saying, that I cannot believe that I'll be using a black color walking stick. I want my walking stick to be designed by Paul Smith, multiple color. I cannot imagine that I'll be sitting in a boring wheelchair if I really need one. My wheelchair should be as fanciful in design and range as a baby's strollers. I cannot imagine myself wearing clothes like as if you're going to put me in the coffin. I still want to look impeccably dressed. So in Japan, even Wako, going beyond inner beauty, they've actually started designing clothing for senior citizens. And it's a high range. It's like $200-300 per piece. Like your Lululemon price range, And it's very comfortable and it's elegant, So they're targeting the affluent senior citizens. So I really think that there's a huge market for healthcare, as we go into step-down care, community care, away from acute care. Acute care is hospital when you really need it, when you're in deep shit, right? Yeah, if you're okay, you try to step-down care. There'll be ample opportunities, for entrepreneurs, And this one, before I forget, one of the things that we really must remember is that in the midst of this COVID, don't get used to just living on grants, and from entrepreneur become grantrepreneur, then you will be in trouble. Okay, remember, these are short-term measures that help you take a breather, but if you are so used to living on handouts and become a full-time grantrepreneur, your business will not last long. Thank you.
Just to add on Mr. Cheng's point. So actually, I initially when I started off, I was very much a entrepreneur. So I was always looking out for ways to survive on some grant. And because, I mean, the two biggest cost to you is manpower and getting a space to do what you want to do. With that being said, moving forward into the future for healthcare and education, I think firstly we have very robust policies and system in place for both case scenarios. And we have, technology and automation that's being infused into this. And we need to ensure, while all this is happening, we have to have compassion and empathy as we move forward. We cannot be just, okay, I want to, push out this service to all these people, but not think about the human touch. So I think that's one thing we need to consider when we're moving forward. And companies or startups need to consider how they can create a system, a leverage system, whereby people who are benefiting from the services can also get necessary support, necessary financial support or whatever means. And one example, I think recently when schools were going back home and people needed laptops and Wi-Fi. I think IMD came up with this laptop scheme whereby people who can't afford it can actually get a laptop and get Wi-Fi. So as we go ahead with pushing out such services, whether it's education or healthcare, we need to have the human touch so that things remain affordable and accessible, and we do it with the heart as well. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to add actually another point with respect to grants. I think there's a balance to be played when you rely on grants as a company. Now, we actually relied on a lot of grants. We were given grants, cloud server credits by Google, by AWS, by Microsoft, by almost everyone. That almost came up to, I think, $300,000 that we leveraged on to build our technology. We were also lucky to have been given grants by SG Innovate, which is the Singapore government, to hire local employees, and they subsidized 80% of our hiring costs. Now, becoming over-reliant on it means that your business will not really take off because you're not focusing on what's good for your business and profitability and sustainability in the long run. But that said, the grants did strongly help us get to where we are today, and we're still using them to get to our next stage of our company's journey. I think it's about finding the right balance where you can leverage grants to scale your business without becoming over-reliant on them to the point that you can't survive without them. Yeah.
Sorry, I fully agree. Of course, we also get the market development grant when we went to Hong Kong from Enterprise Singapore. Fine. At the incubation stage, at the build phase, is fine. Like what the two entrepreneurs mentioned, just don't be over-reliant on them. Always remember when the tire hits the road is how much money that you have in your bank account. I always make this analogy. Revenue is vanity, always the vanity of the CEO. Profitability is sanity. Cash flow is reality. Yeah, so reality is very important for us to survive in business. Thank you.
All right, so I'll hold on the points on these three speakers were sharing. So maybe you can share with us, what is your advice to healthcare and educational institutions that are looking for a technology partner like yourself?
I think I won't say advice. I more would like to say the norm strategies that we follow. I think initially, from my personal perspective, I think institutions need to have an open mind. Because there's no one right solution when they are, choosing the solutions. They can choose a startup. Startups may offer a really good price point, offer the flexibility. And then if they were to choose an established company, they can actually give a really stable product or service. But they will come with a lot of other partnership terms that you have to work around with. So first of all, we have to have an open mind. The institutions have to have an open mind. And I think following which they also need to evaluate how this partnership can pull through eventually, and based on factors such as how the management is going, how there's a financial control, or how you can, have a special exclusivity to it. So that's what we need to evaluate, and following which we need to understand we need to create a win-win situation for both the provider and at the same time the institution. So this win-win situation is needed because as a provider, you need to have the scale in order to have a sustainable model. You need to have the volume to have a sustainable model. You need to overcome your investments. And on the perspective of an institution, you need to ensure that your consumers are getting the full benefit, and that will actually add on to their branding as well. So both sides, we need to find a win-win situation. And lastly, we have to ensure that we re-evaluate the terms, because for a company like a tech company, we need to ensure that we stay relevant with the times, because things keep changing every day. And we also need to improve our capabilities over time and provide new solutions. So that basically, I think, is what we need to look at moving forward. Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, a couple things that I wanted to add to this, and this is more towards startups looking to partner with larger institutions than the other way around. I think the default state is that smaller companies and startups need the larger companies rather than the larger companies needing the startups. And this is because larger companies can afford to take as much time as they want. Most of the times it's generally like an innovation lab within a larger company that's looking to experiment a little bit. It's not really affecting their bottom lines as much today. And one thing to understand, one thing startups should definitely understand is that this is going to be the default no matter what, and they need to find a way to kind of balance that status quo a little bit more to make the larger company need them, and also get really good at understanding when larger companies don't really need them and they should cut their losses early and not spend too much time. Actually, my father-in-law used to head the sourcing and quality control for Gap globally, right? So his goal was to work with factories that would supply raw materials for Gap, decide which ones would stitch their material, and he would do quality control. As part of his role, a lot of companies used to pitch to him to sell Gap their products, and it'll be helping workflow operations and things like that. Now, a lot of times he just wouldn't say no. He'd be excited by the idea, but he had no intention on actually following through with it, and he would kind of string them along, right? Because he's excited, he likes meeting young people, and he would very consciously say, okay, let's see how this goes. How about you build this, this, this? And companies would think it could mean a partnership with Gap, which is a really large clothing brand, and they would spend so much time on it. But my father-in-law would be honest, and he would tell me, look, I know where they're coming from. I'm excited by it, but it's probably not Gap's priority. So companies should kind of understand that, startups should understand that large corporations have different sets of wants. They have different needs. And oftentimes, companies shouldn't partner with a large company for the sake of it and should make sure that the larger company really needs what they're offering. And many times, they should realize the dynamics of large corporations. Small companies, especially young founders, don't realize that. So many times, I've heard stories where a friend's company would get a deal with a large company, not because of the value their product would provide, but the person they would be pitching to would want to look good in front of his boss, and they would do everything to make the guy they're selling to look good in front of his boss, and then they would get the deal, right? But the motivations are so fundamentally different when you're doing enterprise sales like that, or partnerships even. And this is something I think smaller startups would have to recognize and try to address as early on as possible. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Ching, do you have something to share?
Yeah, I've just shared in general, for business partnership, I think as Singaporeans, where we come from, our DNA, it's good to continue to be true to our own hallmark of integrity and honesty and deliver what we've promised. I think these are all the basic fundamentals. The other key thing about getting the right partners is always a two-sided affair. And I always feel that it's important for me to always think from the partner's perspective before I go into any contract. Just to quote an example where my chairman acquired my company, whether how much cash and how much shares should he give me, and that there should be a significant portion of cash versus shares instead of just, he told me, I'm thinking for you. If it's pure share, your risk is very high. If I don't give you certain basic amount, before you let go of the control, you will not feel comfortable and you will not be natural. So it is imperative to always think from the business partner's perspective. and cannot be so micro just to think from your own perspective, because people who are in business at that arena, you can assume that everybody is thinking and smart. So you cannot outsmart people all the time. You have to be fair to yourself and to the partners. Thank you.
I 100% agree with that, actually. And this is something that I see a lot of people make mistakes in, which is they don't think from the perspective of their business partner. Yeah. And this is something I think young entrepreneurs make the most mistakes in, because those who are older, a bit wiser, or have corporate experience, they can naturally tend to think from the perspective of the partner because they've been there and they've experienced it before. Young entrepreneurs, especially those who are fresh out of college, tend to be very weak at this, and this is where they make the most mistakes. And this includes me as well. I made the same mistakes so many times in the past. Yeah. That I had to get my fingers burned before.
But honestly, for someone my generation to be mingling with entrepreneurs of this era, the digital natives, is very refreshing, I can tell you. And deep in my heart, I really admire you guys. At a young age, you can do fantastic things. You can think, you look at Mark Zuckerberg. At 30 years old, he's donating billions to the world. It's amazing. You guys can, I always tell my children the same thing, that he started from basement 2, right? From basement 2, we were poor. If I bring bread on the table, so today I hand over to you street level or level 1. But if you don't build a skyscraper, you have fallen short. You can dream your wildest dream. You guys can achieve so much, with the exposure and everything that you have. Enjoy the journey, and I'm sure you guys will outperform us, because in Singapore, every generation is always better.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Maybe I'd like to ask, this is the last question for all the speakers. Yeah. So what are some of the most innovative technologies in health and education right now? And maybe you can share, what do you think are the key trends to follow in the next 5 years? How about Mr. Biograph, you can start off first?
Yeah, sure. I think this is probably where I would kind of touch back on what I said earlier, which is there's so much more data that we now have available in healthcare through so many different devices. We are moving towards preventive healthcare, and in terms of trends, the companies that leverage this data to produce new solutions, as well as companies that can work in building technology that is very convenient for the user, I think those are the companies that are going to win, especially in healthcare coming on, right? And you kind of see this true with other industries as well. The reason people get order from Amazon is because they deliver it to me the next day, right? No other place used to do that before, right? The reason I use Grab is because I just press a button and the cab's at my doorstep. I think convenience is going to trump all, because I think humans in general are just lazy by nature, and we want whatever is the easiest. So that healthcare solutions that cater to that are what are going to win. And that's where I see the trend going for the next 5 years. On the specifics of technology itself, I would say machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence would play a big part, as well as making medical devices smaller, portable, and easier to use. I think the medical device industry today is undergoing some of the transformations that computers and phones went through in the 2000s. Today, most medical devices are large, they're bulky, they're clunky, right? They're very expensive, very portable, not portable at all. Now, if you can make miniature versions of the same devices that perform just as well, just as we had large computers the size of a room, and then we had desktops, then we have laptops, and now mobiles even, I think those kinds of technologies will also win in healthcare. That's where we are today, healthcare-wise.
Mr. Kanesh?
I think moving forward, first of all, I feel that tech companies or healthcare or health enrichment, we need to education. We need to come up with ideas and bring these ideas out into the world as much as possible. Let's not limit ourselves within Singapore, because of course, with the notion that you need to create a sustainable business, I think with the globalization in place, we need to really push out the ideas out there, whether it's healthcare or not. And try to bring down the cost for local Singaporeans as much as possible as well. Because you have a bigger volume that you can manage, and you can give more cost-effective, affordable solutions.
Economies of scale.
Yeah. So that's I think one thing the future companies in Singapore, especially in these two areas, need to think about. And the other thing is, I think we need to constantly motivate innovation and creativity among the youth, the future. Because as much as we are really good in studying all these years, we need to also try to put into effect what we have learned into physical solutions or solutions for the world. I think this is the direction I'm looking forward to in the future, in the next 5 or 10 years. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kanesh. Mr. Cheng.
For education, I fully agree. AI is going to be a big application, but it will still take time because ultimately, it's not just technology for technology's sake. It's how you answer what the clients require and their pain points. I think, we are looking at AI to looking at the behavior and the question asked and profile the student to ultimately achieve self-directed. So that's one aspect. Talking about healthcare, I mean, in terms of leveraging on technology, I said I'm still hoping that we can adopt a system to record the credit, the goodwill credit of volunteers and all those, so that like maybe when the volunteer reaches 65 years old, he has got accumulated certain number man hours or man days of free care services, for the good karma and the good work that he has done. Not so much to quantify, and but it is a form of recognition, and it's always nice to know and it's very assuring to know that in your old days, you'll be well taken care of for the good works that you have done. So from and I hope that this one will also link it to the grassroots, and we encourage more people to volunteers and more good actions from the community, for our coming senior citizens in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cheng. Thank you, Mr. Bahagraph, and thank you, Mr. Kanesh. We have come to the end of our show, and once again, I'd like to thank our guest speakers for an insightful sharing session, and of course, to our viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in.